Global Metals and Mining in 2026, the Regulatory Thunderdome. Hello and welcome to what I promise will be the most entertaining analysis of global steel, copper, and aluminum markets you'll watch this week. And yes, I know that's a low bar. I mean, we're competing with people reading freight indices for fun. But stick with me, because 2026 is shaping up to be the year when the global commodities market goes from free trade utopia to bureaucratic thunderdome. We've got China slapping export licenses on steel like it's handing out hall passes. The EU is taxing carbon so hard that hydroelectric aluminum from Mozambique somehow costs more than coal-powered Chinese metal. And copper? Oh, copper is having a moment thanks to AI data centers that apparently consume more metal than a Terminator factory. So buckle up. We're about to dive into shipping indices, strategic de-risking, and why Dr. Copper might be the only commodity that actually passed its physical exam. Let's start with everyone's favorite economic indicator, the Baltic Dry Index. For those of you who don't obsessively track shipping rates, and honestly, what are you doing with your lives? The BDI measures the cost of moving raw materials across the ocean. Think of it as the uber surge pricing of bulk commodities. And folks, the BDI is tanking. We're talking 2,005 points in December 2025, down 3.9% in a single day. The Capesize Index, which tracks those massive 150,000-ton ships that haul iron ore, dropped 5.6% in one day to 3,706 points. Now, why does this matter? Because Capesize vessels are basically the Amazon Prime trucks of iron ore. When they're empty, it means Chinese steel mills aren't ordering. And when Chinese steel mills aren't ordering, it's like when your teenager says they're not hungry. Something is very wrong. The Panamax Index, which handles coal and grain, has been falling for 12 straight days. 12. That's longer than most New Year's resolutions last. Here's the kicker. China's ports are currently sitting on 154.3 million tons of imported iron ore. That's the highest level since March 2022. To put that in perspective, that's enough iron ore to build, well, I don't know, probably several dozen Death Stars. The point is, it's a lot. This stockpile means Chinese mills are in hand-to-mouth buying mode. They're not ordering new shipments because they're drowning in inventory. It's like having so much toilet paper from 2020 that you're still using it in 2025. We've all been there. Analysts predict freight rates will stay depressed through 2026. Global seaborne coal trade is expected to drop 6% while ship supply stays flat. That's Economics 101. Too much supply, not enough demand, prices go down. Everyone's sad. Now let's talk about the most bureaucratic plot twist of 2025. China's new steel export licensing system. On December 12, 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce casually dropped a bombshell. Starting January 1st, 2026, if you want to export roughly 300 steel products from China, you need a license. Not a suggestion, not a request, a license. This covers everything from pig iron to railway tracks to fancy stainless steel. Basically, if it contains iron and you want to ship it out of China, congratulations, you now need government approval. Here's how it works. Exporters must submit an export contract proving they have a real buyer, plus a quality inspection certificate. State-owned enterprises get their licenses directly from Beijing. Private companies? They have to grovel to local provincial trade bureaus. It's like a nightclub VIP system, but for steel. Sorry, your company isn't on the list. You'll have to wait outside while Baosteel goes right in. Why is China doing this? 3 reasons. First, Chinese mills have been exporting over 100 million tons of steel because domestic demand is weak. But this panic exporting has destroyed profit margins. The government wants to reduce volume and increase prices. It's the OPEC playbook, but for steel. Second, trade wars. The US, EU, Latin America, and Turkey have all slapped anti-dumping duties on Chinese steel. China's basically saying, fine, we'll restrict our own exports before you force us to. Third, tax fraud. Some exporters were misdeclaring products to claim tax rebates. Claiming scrap metal is alloy steel to get that sweet 13% VAT rebate. The licensing system puts an end to that party. Oh, and speaking of VAT rebates, China cancelled them in December 2024. That 13% subsidy on aluminum, copper, and steel exports, gone. This is China's way of saying, we're done subsidizing the world's steel consumption. The global impact? Longer lead times, more uncertainty, and higher prices. This is great news for alternative suppliers like Turkey, India, and Vietnam. They're basically the understudies who just got called to the main stage. While steel is having an existential crisis, copper is living its best life. Why? Two words: artificial intelligence. AI data centers are copper-intensive beasts. A standard data center uses about 5 to 10 tons of copper per megawatt. An AI data center, try 27 to 33 tons per megawatt. That's a 3-4x increase. Think about it. A single 100 milliwatt AI campus requires thousands of tons of copper for power distribution and cooling systems, and we're building these things everywhere. Add electric vehicles to the mix, which use 3 to 4x more copper than gasoline cars, plus renewable energy infrastructure, and you've got what analysts are calling a structural supply deficit. Let's look at the predictions. Goldman Sachs forecasts a small 160,000 ton surplus in 2026, but expects prices to hit $10,000, $11,000 per ton. JP Morgan is more bullish. They're predicting a 330,000 ton deficit in 2026, with prices potentially hitting $12,500 per ton by Q2. Long term, some analysts think we could see $15,000 by 2035. The most aggressive forecasts go to $20,000, $30,000 in inflation-adjusted terms. Why the shortage? Because new copper mines take 10 to 15 years to develop, and production at existing mines is falling. Chile and Peru, the world's top producers, are dealing with declining ore grades, water shortages, and operational hiccups. Indonesia's Grasberg mine, the world's second largest, has had accidents and production cuts. It's like the universe is conspiring to make copper scarce right when we need it most. Meanwhile, China's sitting on record high copper inventories at COMEX. But global ex-China supply is tight. The conclusion? Copper is the only metal that got an A+ on its fundamentals exam. While steel is getting detention, copper is getting college scholarships. Let's talk about Nippon Steel, Japan's largest steelmaker, and their masterclass in getting the hell out of Dodge. On December 12, 2025, Nippon announced their 2030 vision. The headline? A $40 billion investment plan to basically move their profit center out of Japan. Their goal: increase overseas profits from 115 billion yen in 2025 to 500 billion yen by 2030. That means half their profits will come from outside Japan. Where's the money going? First, the United States. Nippon is buying U.S. steel for $15 billion, then pumping another $11 billion into modernizing the facilities by 2028. They're converting old blast furnaces to electric arc furnaces and bringing Japanese high-grade automotive steel tech to America. Why? Because the U.S. market is protected by tariffs. It's like a gated community for steel producers. Once you're in, you're safe from Chinese competition. Second, India. Nippon's joint venture with ArcelorMittal, AMNS India, is building new integrated steel plants in southern India. Why India? Because while Japan's steel demand is shrinking, aging population, mature infrastructure, India's demand is booming. It's the only market big enough to offset Japan's decline. Now, Nippon's CEO won't say de-risking from China out loud. That would be rude. But the strategy is crystal clear. Move capital away from China's sphere of influence and into markets protected by tariff walls. It's like when you slowly stop hanging out with your toxic friend and start spending more time with your stable, drama-free friends, but with billions of dollars and blast furnaces. All right, buckle up for the wildest regulatory development. The EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, or as I like to call it, the Great Green Paperwork Nightmare. Starting January 1st, 2026, if you import steel or aluminum into the EU, you must buy CBAM certificates to cover the embedded carbon emissions in your products. Now here's where it gets weird. The EU is phasing this in slowly. 2026, you pay 2.5% of the carbon cost. 2027, 5%. 2030, 48.5%. 2034, 100%. So 2026 doesn't sound too bad, right? Wrong. Because the devil is in the default values. If your supplier can't provide verified emission data that meets EU standards, the system assigns you a default value, which is basically a penalty rate. Let's take Mozambique aluminum. Mosul produces aluminum using hydroelectric power. That's literally the greenest aluminum you can make short of hand cranking it yourself. But guess what? The EU's default calculation hits Mozambique with 168 euros per ton in CBAM costs. Why? Because Mozambique's grid is interconnected with South Africa's coal-heavy grid. Even though Mozal uses hydro, if they can't prove it with EU-compliant documentation, the system assumes the worst-case scenario. Meanwhile, Indian and UAE aluminum gets a 51 euro ton default. Chinese products get 3 TCO2 ton defaults. So green aluminum from Mozambique pays more than coal-powered metal from elsewhere. That's not a typo, that's just bureaucracy. For steel, the distortions are even crazier. Indonesian hot-rolled coil, lots of nickel pig iron, coal heavy, 500 plus euros ton CBAM cost. Indian steel, 230 euros ton. Turkish and Vietnamese steel, on 80 euros ton. This means Turkish and Vietnamese steel will dominate the EU market in 2026, while Indonesian and even some Indian producers get priced out. The lesson? In 2026, it's not enough to be green. You have to prove you're green according to Brussels' standards. It's like having a college degree but needing it notarized, apostilled, and translated into 24 languages before anyone believes you. So what does all this mean? 2026 is the year commodities markets shift from price competition to compliance competition. China factor. Export licenses and removed tax rebates mean Chinese steel and aluminum will be more expensive and harder to access. China is no longer the world's deflationary force. They're taking their ball and going home, or at least charging you more to play with it. Carbon bureaucracy. CBAM will function as a non-tariff barrier for countries with weak data infrastructure. If you can't file the paperwork, you can't access the market. It's protectionism with a green label. Capital flows. Nippon Steel's strategy confirms what we all suspected. Money is fleeing aging markets like Japan and China for growing protected markets like the US and India. Commodity divergence. This is the key theme. Steel and iron ore are facing structural headwinds. Chinese demand saturation, massive port stockpiles, production constraints. It's like a restaurant with too many tables and not enough customers. But copper is the Beyonce of industrial metals. AI data centers, electric vehicles, renewable energy. Everything that's growing needs copper. We're heading into a multi-year bull market. So here's my advice. If you're an investor, diversify. Don't treat all metals the same. Steel is entering its regulation and paperwork era. Copper is entering its scarcity and premium pricing era. If you're a manufacturer, start building relationships with Turkish and Vietnamese steel suppliers now. Learn the CBAM documentation requirements yesterday. And if you use copper, consider hedging because prices are going up. And if you're a regulator, maybe simplify the forms. Just a thought. Final thoughts. 2026-2030 will be an era where supply chain transparency, strategic partnerships, and regulatory compliance matter as much as production costs. It's not enough to make cheap steel anymore. You need to make compliant cheap steel, preferably with proper documentation. In triplicate, notarized. Welcome to the future of commodities, where the pen is mightier than the blast furnace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this romp through freight indices and carbon taxes, please subscribe. And remember, in commodities as in life, it's not about what you know, it's about what you can document. See you next time.